10 worst Porsches in the history of the company. Today, you will find out which Porsche model stalled every 15 minutes. What model lost in a street race Toyota Corolla? What model Porsche no one wanted to buy and because of this campaign was on the verge of bankruptcy? And finally, what model accidentally exploded at launch? First, the Porsche Cayenne, a legendary status SUV that is so desirable to own, unless you don't mind occasionally selling your kidney to maintain it. After all, who wouldn't want to own a car where repairs cost as much as a nice vacation in the Maldives? Well, how could you not? Because what could be more fun than frequent visits to the mechanic and constant breakdowns? Now imagine, you are refueling your Cayenne, and next to you someone is refueling their airplane. Yes, the fuel consumption of this beast is such that you would think that you are refueling not a car, but a Boeing 747. And do not forget that you do it all with a clear conscience, because carbon dioxide emissions of Cayenne are such that ecologists have nightmares every night. Next is the high starting price. You thought buying a Porsche was an investment? How could it not be? The aftermarket price drops so fast that it can only be compared to the morning drop in your mood when you realize how much you still have to spend to maintain this treasure. The Cayenne's luggage compartment is such that it can only fit your dream of a large trunk. But do not worry, because the rigid sports suspension guarantees you sporty sensations even on rough roads. No comfort, only drive, especially when you bounce on every bump. Maneuvering in the city in the Cayenne is a real adventure. It's especially fun when you're trying to park this beast. You'll probably need an assistant, or better, two. And the feedback at high speeds? No, there's no feedback at all. Somebody thought it was a small thing. Now, onto the electronics. Modern systems, which like to fail at the most inopportune moment, create a feeling that you live in a constant show broken again. Well, the interface of the infotainment system is a real quest. Try to figure it out. And finally, the technical shortcomings. Uneven operation of the gearbox and engine overheating? Of course, what could be more fun than feeling like your gearbox has a life of its own and your engine overheats at every opportunity? A real treat for car enthusiasts. So if you want adventure, a dose of laughter and endless spending, the Porsche Cayenne is your perfect choice. After all, there is nothing better than experiencing the daily joys of owning this masterpiece of engineering thought. Second, Porsche 987, the second generation of Boxster and Cayman models, which brings so many joys to its owners. Let's start with the cost of ownership. You think that since it's a Porsche at a more affordable price, your wallet will be safe? Not so. Maintenance and repairs on this beauty can quickly make your savings an illusion. Every visit to the mechanic turns into a financial ride where you invariably lose. Reliability? Oh, that's a song. Intermediate shaft bearing, IMS. Problems are a reminder that your motor can suddenly turn into expensive scrap metal. Rumor has it that this motor could stall once every 15 minutes. Perhaps for 987 owners, the word repair has become too frequent in their vocabulary. The comfort of the interior is a separate story. The front seats are still okay, but if we are talking about the rear seats in the Cayman, it's just an anecdote. These seats are more suited for small children or your dolls, not adult passengers. Practicality? Forget about it. Performance? Yes, the 987 has good handling, but you may find some models underpowered. If you're expecting a Porsche to feel like taking off in a jet airplane, this car may disappoint you. It's like expecting a storm of emotion from a game of chess. Noise insulation? That's a separate comedy altogether. At high speeds or on rough roads, the salon turns into a concert stage for all possible noises. Driving comfort? No, we have not heard. Problems with the gearbox? Of course. The manual gearbox is sometimes so stiff and unresponsive that you feel like you're playing an arcade game with ancient joysticks. Shifting gears becomes a real test of your nerves. Practicality? It's funny to say. The luggage compartment is so small, it feels like it was designed to hold your lunch, not your luggage. If you love traveling light and hate big suitcases, the 987 is your perfect companion. Third, Porsche 718 Boxster, a small sports car that causes admiration at first glance, but only until you get to know all its charms. Let's start with the price. This baby is positioned as the most affordable in the Porsche lineup, but don't be fooled. Its price is still high, and if you want to add a couple of options, your wallet will feel like it's been ruined. Now let's talk about the engine. Switching to 4-cylinder turbo engines is like swapping a delicious cheeseburger for coleslaw. The new engine sounds like it has a constant stomachache, and turbo yips are a special pleasure when accelerating. Fans of 6-cylinder Porsche engines cry every time they hear this masterpiece of engineering. Comfort in a saloon is a separate song. Yes, materials are premium, assembly is excellent, but there is as much space as in a closet for shoes. Tall drivers and passengers will have to learn to fold in 3 legs. An absence of rear seats and miniature luggage compartment make this car perfectly impractical for daily use. Noise insulation? No way! There is virtually no noise insulation in a convertible. Road and wind noise will be your constant companion, especially at high speeds. Every trip turns into a soundtrack from Fast and Furious, but without the fun entourage. Operating costs are just a song to your finances. Porsche maintenance and repair costs have always been high, and the Boxster is no exception. Parts cost like an airplane wing, and visits to the mechanic are like going to an expensive restaurant. Always a pain on the wallet. Visibility and visibility? Yes, of course, the low driver seat and high rear spoiler will make your life more interesting. Every time you need to reverse or maneuver in the city, you'll feel like you're playing vehicular Tetris. And finally, the control system and multimedia. This is a real adventure for those who love puzzles. The interface is so intricate that it takes more time to master it than it does to drive. So, if you are ready for endless trials and are willing to put up with all the joys of owning a Porsche 718 Boxster for the sake of status and driving pleasure, then this car is definitely for you. After all, what can be better than to experience all the charms of this miracle of engineering thought every day? Fourth, Porsche Macan, a compact luxury crossover which wants to be everything for everyone, but manages to forget about the simplest things. Let's start with its cost. Did you think you could afford this little engineering masterpiece? Well, you can't. The cost of a Macan is like buying a yacht. Even if you find the starting price acceptable, adding options and improvements will make your bank weep. And then there are those maintenance and repair costs, like you're maintaining a small spaceship. Rear seat comfort is a separate story altogether. You were hoping your passengers could relax and enjoy the ride? Ha ha ha, that's not the case. There's so much legroom in the back that it feels like you're sitting in a shoebox. And try going on a long trip with adult passengers and you'll be screaming, "Get out of my way!" The luggage compartment? It's so small that if you suddenly want to carry more than one suitcase, you'll have to do Tetris-level math. Competitors in the compact crossover segment can laugh at the Macan's trunk. Fuel consumption is a song. Powerful engines and sporty performance are cool, but in reality, you'll spend more time at the gas station than on the road. Be prepared for frequent visits to the gas station and constant questions from the cashier as to why you're stopping by so often. Reliability and frequency of repairs are not top-notch either. Porsche is known for its quality, but sometimes the Macan suffers from electronics and transmission problems. You'll be lucky if you don't find yourself a regular at a service where they recognize you by name. The Macan's noise insulation is almost a myth. At high speeds or over rough roads, you'll enjoy the symphony of the outside world that permeates the cabin. Driving comfort is compromised, and every sound becomes your companion for the entire trip. Handling and maneuverability at low speeds? Let's just say that if you are adventurous, parking on narrow streets and maneuvering in tight spaces will be a daily challenge for you. Every time you try to park, you'll feel like an action movie hero. Fifth, the Porsche 914, a legend of the past that has managed to keep all its flaws and bring them to the present. Let's start with the design. Who would have thought that Porsche would decide to produce a car that looks like a box with wheels? The angular lines and simple knee-drawn styling make you wonder if this car was designed in a dark basement by an amateur designer. Performance? Oh, it's a song. 4-cylinder engines that sound like they're trying to remind you of their pitiful power at every mile. Acceleration to 60 miles per hour takes so long that you have time to grab a cup of coffee and read the newspaper. Top speed? Well, let's just say that if you like slow cruising, this is definitely your choice. Well, and if you want to give gas from a traffic light, then make sure that there is no one near you, because even Toyota Corolla can overtake you. Now, about comfort and quality of assembly. The Salon of 914 reminds a school desk, Spartan and uncomfortable. Interior materials seem cheap, as if they were bought on sale in the nearest store. Noise insulation? No, we haven't heard. Every trip is a concert of road noises, which you are guaranteed not to fall asleep at the wheel. Reliability of 914 is a separate story. This car breaks down so often that you will know the mechanics by name. Problems with electronics, suspension and engine make owning a 914 a real quest. Parts for this engineering marvel are as hard to find as a needle in a haystack, and their cost can make your wallet thinner. Practicality? That's a funny thing to say. The small trunk and lack of rear seats make the 914 ideal for those who never carry anything but keys and a cell phone. There's no storage space, so forget about long trips or weekend shopping. High-speed handling? No way, it's a thrill ride. The rear engine layout makes every trip a lottery. Will you make it through without adventure? Stability and predictability are not the 914's strong suit, so hold on tight to the wheel. And of course, there are the operating costs. Servicing and repairing this rarity can cost a fortune, especially given its age and difficulty in finding parts. Owning a 914 is a financial ride you're unlikely to want to get into a second time. Sixth, Porsche Panamera, any car enthusiast's dream, unless you don't mind investing all your savings into this miracle car. Let's start with the fact that the cost of owning a Panamera is like an annual membership to a luxury club. The initial price is already biting, and if you add all the options and features, you can easily reach the amount for which you can buy a small island. And that's not all. Maintenance and repair of Panamera costs so much that each visit to a mechanic can be compared to buying a new gadget. Riding comfort is a separate story. Yes, Panamera is positioned as a luxury sports sedan, but rigid suspension will make every trip on uneven roads a real test on strength of your nerves and spine. Rear seats also do not please spaciousness and comfort, especially if you have high passengers, who will have to put up with cramped space. As for performance, there are nuances. Powerful engines are certainly cool, but the weight of the car makes its handling in corners a bit heavy. Every time you enter a corner, it feels like you're pulling a whole house behind you. Fuel consumption of Panamera is a separate song. Even with the hybrid versions, the overall fuel consumption is such that you'll spend more time at the gas station than on the road. Your wallet will cry every time you go to the gas station, especially in city driving. And don't forget about insurance. The cost of insurance for the Panamera is so high that it feels like you're insuring an entire fleet. The premium status of the car and high repair costs make insurance another nice expense. Seventh, meet the Porsche 944, an attempt to right the wrongs of the 924, but sadly unsuccessful. When Porsche announced the 944, many thought it would be the brand's long-awaited return to its sports car roots. But as it turned out, the 944 was only a slight improvement on what was clearly not good enough. The 944's powertrain was more powerful than the 924 ES, but even 163 horsepower couldn't make this car fast. If you thought you were going to feel an adrenaline rush getting behind the wheel, you were likely only going to feel disappointment. Acceleration was slow and unimpressive, and the top speed left much to be desired. In addition, there was a rumor that the powertrain could catch fire on its own. The interior of the 944 left mixed feelings. On the one hand, it was a step forward compared to the 924, but on the other hand, it still looked cheap and unmodern. Plastic panels and seats that looked more like office chairs than sports seats did not add either luxury or coziness to the car. Comfort was at the level of budget cars, which clearly did not meet the expectations from Porsche. As for handling, here the 944 made a step forward, but not as much as one would like. The suspension was still stiff, and the steering wheel was heavy and clumsy. Every bump in the road felt like you were driving over a gravel embankment, not asphalt. Driving for long distances became a real challenge. The 944's appearance didn't help improve its reputation either. Although the design had been updated, the car still looked dated and unimpressive. The angular lines and overall look did not inspire admiration from passers-by, and the owners themselves were often embarrassed that they had such a car. For those who wanted to feel like they owned a Porsche, the 944 seemed like a good opportunity. But the truth was that it was just another compromise car that didn't live up to the brand's high standards. People bought it because of the brand name, but were disappointed with the quality and performance. While the 944 wasn't a disaster, it still left a lot to be desired. Its legacy is a reminder that not all Porsche experiments were successful. Today, this car remains in history as another failed step on the road to perfection. Eighth, in our parade of failures, the eighth will be the Porsche 928. This car was conceived as a replacement for the 911 and was supposed to be the new flagship of the brand. However, despite its ambitions, the 928 became an example of how high expectations can turn into huge disappointment. A massive V8 lurked under the hood, but instead of providing a sporty character, it added weight and awkwardness to the car. Externally, the Porsche 928 looked like something that came to us from the past rather than the future. Its design was so odd and angular that it raised more questions than admiration. Many car enthusiasts compared it to a beached whale because of its bulkiness and clumsiness. One of the 928's biggest problems was its handling. Instead of the sporty and precise ride that Porsche fans expected, they got a heavy and clumsy car. The weight of this car made driving it a real challenge, especially on narrow and winding roads. Owners often complained that driving the 928 was like wrestling with a giant brick on wheels. As one owner said, he was overtaken even by a Toyota Corolla. The 928's interior wasn't exactly awe-inspiring either. Yes, it was luxurious, but this luxury was heavy and clumsy. The leather-covered seats felt more like living room chairs than sports seats, and the control panels looked like the result of design experiments that went too far. As for reliability, the 928 did not shine here either. Electrical problems, engine overheating, and frequent transmission failures made its maintenance an expensive pleasure. Owners often joked that it was better to buy a house near the Porsche service center to save on trips back and forth, and despite all these problems, the Porsche 928 sold. Perhaps because it was a Porsche, and the brand had a huge army of fans ready to forgive it a lot. But in the end, the 928 was a lesson for the company, which realized that sometimes it's better to follow proven traditions than to try to reinvent the wheel. Sometimes innovation leads to amazing results, but in the case of the Porsche 928, innovation turned into problems that no one wanted to deal with. This car was an example of how bad decisions can ruin the reputation of even the most respected manufacturer. No one wanted to buy this model, and because of this, the campaign was on the verge of bankruptcy. Subsequently, Porsche returned to its roots, continuing to produce cars that really met the expectations of fans of the brand. 9th. Meet the Porsche 924, a car that looks more like a prototype than a finished product. This masterpiece was Porsche's first front-engine model, but it turned out to be more like an attempt to sell you an unfinished project. An engine from Audi and a rear axle from Volkswagen was the perfect combination for those who wanted to feel like they owned a cheap Porsche-branded hodgepodge. The interior of the 924 is a separate story. One gets the impression that it was designed by design students as part of an exam on minimalism. Plastic panels, cheap to the touch steering wheel and seats, which could be confused with folding chairs for a picnic. If you dreamed of luxury sitting inside the 924, you felt cheated. Power? Well, the 125 horsepower of this 2-liter engine from Audi was a far cry from what is associated with Porsche. In an era when sports cars were all about top speeds and rapid acceleration, the 924 offered you a slow but sure forward motion experience, a real find for those who are in no hurry to get anywhere. Another feature of the 924 is its steering. Instead of a precise and responsive steering wheel, you got something resembling truck steering. The stiff suspension transmitted all the bumps in the road right into the cabin, making every trip a real test for your back. Driving this car could quickly go from pleasure to torture. But the 924's biggest problem wasn't its handling or power. The reliability of this car left a lot to be desired. The electrics often failed, the engine suffered from overheating, and the gearbox was so capricious that owners often spent more time in the service than on the road. Repairing the Porsche 924 was expensive, which added even more frustration. As for the exterior styling, there was nothing to save this car either. The angular lines and old-fashioned design made it look like an outdated design, rather than a cutting-edge sports car. Even in its best years, the 924 looked outdated and boring, failing to elicit admiring glances from passers-by. Of course, there were those who appreciated this car for its unusual approach and some uniqueness. But for the majority of buyers, the Porsche 924 became a symbol of how not to make sports cars. In the end, this experience became a lesson for the company, which fortunately made conclusions and continued to produce more successful models. 10th. Next on our list is the Porsche 996, which was arguably the most controversial 911 model. It was the first water-cooled 911, which in itself caused a storm of outrage among fans. But that was only the beginning of the problems. First, the design. Those egg crate headlights were a nightmare for fans of the classic 911 look. Many felt that it was these headlights that ruined the harmony and uniqueness of the look. turning it into something completely unattractive. Even today, more than 20 years later, the 996 remains one of the most controversial models because of its appearance. Secondly, the engine. The switch to water cooling was justified from a performance standpoint, but the early years of production were marred by numerous engine problems. IMS bearings, intermediate shaft bearing, were a real headache for 996 owners. A bearing failure could lead to complete engine failure, requiring expensive repairs or even engine replacement. The interior of the 996 didn't help improve its reputation either. Materials looked cheap, and the overall design seemed too utilitarian for a car of this class. Owners often complained about the build quality and materials used, which did not meet the high standards expected from Porsche. As for handling, the 996 was certainly up to the mark, but that didn't make up for the rest of its shortcomings. Yes, it drove well, but when everything else leaves a lot to be desired, handling alone isn't enough to make a car truly successful. Reliability issues also plagued the 996. Owners often encountered various mechanical problems that required expensive maintenance. As a result, despite its relatively affordable price compared to previous 911 models, the cost of owning this car could be unexpectedly high. Thank you for watching. If you agree with our unbiased opinion, which is based on facts only, please like and subscribe. This is the truth.